Well, my name's Peter Hennessey and this is my work, my Hubble. This work for me is the answer to two questions really. The first of which is, how big is it? Like, how big is it really? And the second is, could you make it yourself? I'm happy to say that I do now know the answer to both those questions. And they are that it's, on one level, kind of frighteningly big, much bigger than you might expect, but at the same time, in the context of the universe that it lives in, really quite small. And the other answer is, yes, you can make it yourself with a bit of effort and some help. And there it is. The process for me is I begin by designing all the little pieces. So this is made out of laser-cut plywood. And so my first port of call is taking the object and actually designing all the parts, every little bit, so that it all fits together. And that's in some way the hardest part of it. But there's about 6 weeks of work in just trying to kind of recreate this very complete model of the object, and then another 5 weeks here in this room on the island with 3 or 4 volunteers to build it. But the real question is why I would choose to try to make something like this, to make a full-sized, fairly exacting reenactment of the Hubble Space Telescope in plywood, which is obviously what this is. I've worked previously for a long time on computers, doing new media work, interactive websites, CD-ROMs, that kind of thing. Part of the general kind of legion of people at work in digitising the world. And in the time that I was doing that, I found myself growing increasingly dissatisfied with my role in that, and sort of increasingly aware of the difference between something that you experience as a picture and something that you experience as a real object. The difference between seeing a photo of something and standing next to it. But also increasingly aware of the fact that more and more of our life and the information and the stuff that constitutes our experience comes to us via a mediated form, via pictures of one kind or another. And so I was sort of quite interested to move away from the computer screen and out into the real world. And so I embarked on a series of projects which are all subtitled My Hubble being the latest of them, where I'm essentially looking to, I guess, undigitize something, to take something which, for pretty much all of us, will only ever be experienced as a picture. And in fact, a picture floating out in a fairly abstract kind of contextless space, and trying to see if I could somehow reconstitute that object in a physical form, and I guess explore the experience of the mass of the object, the form of the object, the shape of the object, the difference in fact between the object as a picture and the object as a thing, and to try and allow that, I guess, to resonate. But beyond that, I'm very interested in the object itself. I'm not just interested in choosing something at random to kind of reenact. The Hubble Space Telescope is really quite an interesting object for an artist, because what it is essentially is it's a device that makes pictures. It's a thing that floats out there and constructs these extraordinary images of sort of deep, dark, long ago places in the universe. And as an artist, that to me seems like quite an interesting project for an artist to do. So I'm quite struck by the relationship between a kind of purity that you find in that really very precise and abstract sort of astronomy and astrophysics and things like that, a sort of idealism that you find in that kind of science, and the way that it connects to what artists do. We often kind of imagine that we're very different, that they're two very different worlds, but I actually think they're worlds that are actually extraordinarily similar. Also because these kind of scientists, the kind of scientists that are working on something like Hubble, are equally constrained by the realities of the world that we live in today, which doesn't necessarily place kind of pure, abstract research at the heart of its endeavours, a world which is, you know, very much more interested in perhaps creating strangely abstract financial products with which it can kind of trade backwards and forwards rather than sort of delving necessarily into the origins of the universe. And so the scientists who created Hubble laboured long and hard to produce something that makes something that is, you know, both beautiful and kind of poetic, and sort of without, almost without needing a reason to do it. And so part of me is interested in exploring that. But what I did for this particular work, I guess, was to try and turn it around. I was interested in not just reenacting the telescope as an object, but also trying to find some way to sort of reenact what the object does, what the telescope does. And what it does is it sort of brings a certain part of the universe into focus. And in my case, I've turned it around and pointed it down and focused it on this area of ground that you're all actually standing on. And so the telescope itself functions as a kind of an invitation to the people who come here to create something to view through it. The nice thing about this telescope, for me anyway, is that it actually makes things look further away. When you go and stand up there and you look through it, it's kind of hard to make out what it is that's on the ground here, whereas you can actually stand on the ground and see it in great detail. And I'm sure that must be what it feels like in Alpha Centauri. It must seem much more kind of sort of grainier and closer up than it does for us, and we see this sort of strange abstracted image of it. And so my invitation, I guess, to the people who visit the work is that they then can participate in creating a sort of universe for themselves on the ground in front of them. The other thing I'm quite interested in is the fact that we have all sorts of repositories of digital knowledge gives us this impression that we know a lot of stuff. Because we can just quickly pick up our telephone or our computer and Google something and get, you know, 137,000 results and 150 million images of it, gives us this impression that somehow we have this really amazing ability to know about things very, very quickly and easily. And so my work begins with a Google search. It begins with a search of the freely available images that are there on the internet, and I work from that. And what's interesting for me in reconstituting the work from these, I guess, these echoes of the physical object that exist, is that when you start to look at them really, really closely, they don't all match up. I've got 6 or 7 really detailed images of the Hubble Space Telescope, but they're not all the same. So which of these images is the real Hubble? I don't know. No one will ever know. We're never, you know, I'm pretty sure that none of us will ever get a chance to stand next to the actual object. So it's kind of interesting to me the way that we have this sense that we have captured everything in digital form or in pictures or in encyclopedias or whatever, that we have actually captured all this stuff and we don't need to worry about the actual thing. But in fact we haven't caught it at all. We've caught a whole series of kind of echoes of it, and what we're left is something that's actually a little bit more patchy and insubstantial. And so you know, my work, it's pretty convincing, I think, and it's kind of as accurate as I can make it. But again, it sort of loses something. It loses something in the reproduction, and so it sort of enacts that process of what is lost as we increasingly transform objects into pictures.